Hey everybody, Brian Brosdahl here, also known as Bro. I have Bro's Guide Service in northern Minnesota. I want to talk a little bit about drop shots. When you hear drop shots, you think right away of bass fishing, but drop shots have been a big part of my walleye repertoire for many, many years, for decades actually, and never talked about them too much. Didn't use them all the time, but for one reason, I really used to do a lot of tournaments, and every little nugget you could get would help you maybe get more weight than the rest. And for years and years and years, we were looking for that better mousetrap. But drop shots have come full circle. I started out using a traditional drop shot, which is on the line, and you'll see it in a little bit. But you could throw a bait at the fish's level. And many have caught bass by accident fishing drop shot, and walleyes, or walleyes fishing for bass drop shot. But either way, when the bait's at their level, your odds increase. And for many years, we're finding out we've been fishing below the fish. So where do you use drop shots? Pretty much anywhere, but there are places that they work way better. For instance, in this photo here, we're fishing in 10 feet of water, and the fish are 5 feet off the bottom. You can almost see them. You can see little ghosts out there. And so short weeds are good places to use them, snaggy areas, slimy areas. And the slime is actually algae. Filamentous algae starts on the surface, falls down, sinks, gets on weeds, and it's like it's a very coarse kind of hair stuff that gets on your jig, and it just drapes over your bait, covers your bait so the fish can't find it. Now, it's natural, and crayfish live in it, minnows live underneath it, so it's a hiding place, and fish will hang around a little bit. But there's the slimy stuff that's really green, and that stuff's out this year. So this is really important for this year, and it was there out there last year. As soon as the weeds came up, it got warm really fast, and algae covered them. And so this keeps your bait elevated and out of the slime. So the place to use drop shots is where you could keep it visible and clean from the fish. I like to use a St. Croix 6'3" or 7 foot, and that's in a medium light. And you could use Avids, you could use Premier, you can use Legend Elite or Tournament. It just depends on you. It's like using a sports car to go, out in the, looking for grouse or deer trails. You don't want to take a car that you get stuck with. You want to take a truck. And so using the right rod's really important, but there's times I like to use an Avid. I love the shape of the handle. The handle shape is very important because you're going to be using it for long hours, and I like the flare of the handle. It's got a nice grip, and it feels good throwing in a sinker and a drop shot. If you're just underhanded throwing, it's really nice. You can cover some water. Legend Elite, I really like those in situations where I'm in clear water. I'm using like a 3/16 ounce sinker at the bottom. I like a really light, medium light Legend Elite. Get a windy day, I'll go shorter. If it's windy, you want to use even 6 foot. So you got your hook and your sinker, and you can just kind of set it in there, and you could feel that fish running to the side with it. But I'll just shake it, and that's why I like Legend Elite. It's super light, and it's just like hunting. Do you want to walk around with the Mossberg or the Benelli? What do you want to walk around with? What do you want to use? So in fishing, I have all different rods, all different levels of costs, and I do it for a living, so I got to try everything. And for really, really tough situations, I like the Avid with my clients with a softer tip that the fish could pull on the leech. And I like the Legend Elite when my neck and money is on the line for a tournament. So, that's key. And when do you use drop shots? Typically, you can use it anytime that you can present it in the fish's face. If it's in the spring, you probably don't need to use it because you're just going to throw a jig to the bottom with a spot tail shiner or a leech or a fathead or a small sucker or plastics even sometimes. If you're on a river, Mississippi, use plastics year-round. You just drag them. They still eat them. But on glacial lakes, tougher lakes, clear lakes, lakes that are known to be fussy feeding fish, you definitely have to use minnows. But on these lakes, when the walleyes start rising up off the bottom, they get harder to present the bait to them. So drop shot puts the bait at the fish's face, at the level of the fish. So instead of fishing for fish, you're fishing fish. So at forward viewing and side imaging, you're always fishing fish. That's the difference between now and 5, 6 years ago, 8 years ago. We were fishing for fish. Now we're fishing fish. And so you want to fish the fish where they're at. And that's why drop shots have become super hot. They're winning tournaments, but there is a slight caveat to that. And you're going to see it coming up here in this presentation. Longer drop shots, I'll use longer rods, like 7 to 7.6. But still, you don't have to make it too heavy. If you're throwing a 3/8 ounce sinker or a 1 ounce sinker and you're fishing walleyes in 25 to 40 feet or more, yeah, walleyes can live in deep waters. And I don't go for them there because more often than not, they get barrel trauma and they die. But for a tournament, if you have to go, or for whatever reason, I've caught them as deep as 104, and they don't always use that. And more with zebra mussels, walleyes are using shallower water than we've ever seen. But if they're deep, most of the time deep is 30s, 20s to 30s. You can use maybe a heavier action, like an extra fast all the time is what I use, but maybe in a medium. And so 7.6, maybe even a 7.10 would be really good. So longer drop shots. And last year I was using 10-footers at times. Even for panfish, I shot a Lund TV show and we were using a 10-foot dropper. And then as the day progressed, they were dropping down, clipped off the dropper, they were 6 feet off the bottom. The general rule of thumb on droppers, especially my adaptations, is to go a foot more than the depth the walleyes are off the bottom. So keep that in mind. A braid, mono, fluoro, you could use anything you want. Just remember with mono, it's a little spongier. It floats nice to your drop shot, but it is like a bungee cord. And even with fluorocarbon, it's a bungee cord when you're drop shotting. If you're using heavyweight and you have a bait caster, it's nice. Give me braid every time. I'll use a back-to-back uni from my line to the drop shot rig that I'm tying, and I can feel it. I could have 20 feet of line, fluorocarbon tied to my drop shot, and pitch it out there, and you can feel every sensation. It casts great. Your knots up your reel. So I like all these tips that they have at St. Croix. The tips are perfect for knots to flow out, and their eyes are the real deal. They're all shaped just right for the knots to float. So if you have to use longer leaders, do. And when I'm tying drop shots, I'll go 3 arm lengths so I have extra material to deal with. If you tie a drop shot too close to the bottom and then you want to go higher, well, you could just leave that drop shot. Just take the loop. You could take the hook off and just move it up. So I have knots in my line from adaptations and changing during the day. But you never worry about knots in your line below your hook. They can't break the knot by the sinker. And if you lose the sinker, who cares? As long as there's no knot above the hook. So what's better than 2 Legend X rods? Oh, well, the answer is 2. And I thought that was funny because when you use a Legend X, there again, it's preference. You're getting something that has, it's not an elite thing. It's more of a high quality thing. They're super light. Here at the St. Croix customer appreciation, it's very enjoyable to be here because I could put this stuff in the customer's hands and they understand. But it's like a feather. You can pick it up and you feel everything. You feel the bait on your drop shot. And that's important because the fish, sometimes they're swimming forward with it so you don't feel them, and sometimes to the side. Sometimes they hit it. Well, you can use any rod in the lineup when they just hit it. But it's for all the other cases that you want to think about these beautifully mastered and crafted rods. And that's why I use a lot of Legend X, but the Avids love to. So I like to fish droppers downwind. So when you're setting up the fish, you find your fish on side imaging, hummingbird, or use forward viewing, and I use Humminbird Mega Live, and I have the update, and I could see fish perfectly, really far away, and I can watch my drop shot. I'll go around the fish very carefully, and that's just it. When you're looking for fish, don't run them over. Don't bear down your throttle on them. All you're doing is pushing them away, and they might not reassemble. Sneak around the fish upwind. Spot lock with your Minn Kota and pitch back on the fish. And what I like to do with sight imaging is I will mark the fish on the spot, then I'll use a cursor to measure my distance to the fish. Very handy tool. You could always measure, and when you're going around, it tells you how far you are. And I like to stay at least 40 feet away, if not 50 or 60. Drop shots have the weight at the bottom, so when you pitch it, it flies. Even an underhanded toss, it just goes sailing out there. So it's not a jab. It's a smooth, fluid. When you're playing baseball and you're up batting, you don't hit the ball like this. You do a smooth throw. And I always tell customers when they're throwing it is to throw and let it go at 1 o'clock, basically. 11 o'clock, or if you go 11 o'clock, it's going to fall on your head. But if you let go too high, it's going to loft. Just throw it nice and easy, and you'll be surprised at how it goes. And you won't throw your bait off. You don't have to worry about that stuff because it's balanced. And just wish I would have done this stuff many, many years ago. And I started drop shots over 20 years ago. Had a lot of experimentation when you're doing tournaments, and other people have too, but adding a finger line is everything. So side imaging is still super important. And here's an image I captured as I'm out cruising. I could go really fast. I mean, I could still see stuff and fish. This is sitting still. That's why the rocks on the left side are blurred. It's actually sitting still, but you can still see the fish as they're swimming by. And there's a big school of fish. So people say, where should I cast? Anywhere on the right side of the boat. There's so many fish there. And with forward viewing, you can see them, but you're not just picking off a few fish and then directing traffic with your clients. When you get this many fish, they can cast anywhere. And I found, being that I always put the fish basically on the client side of the boat, and I don't see any on my side, I still catch them. Because there's always fish in between the beams, underneath, above, or who knows where, right under your boat sometimes. And so if you have like a bunch of beams, you're not going to miss anything, but that's what we call fair chase. Let a few make it through. So you can see it on forward viewing. So what I'll do is I'll tie. There's all different renderings here that I've got. I will tie stuff on here, and I can see it on forward viewing. You can see your leech, but objects on your drop shot help you see it. In beads, pill floats, even sequins. So a sequin is a decoration that people use when they're stitching up stuff, or like, little decorations you put on dresses and clothes. And not that I'm into sewing, but the first thing I thought of, reflecting off my forward viewing, there's a little tip for watching. Put a little sequin in front of your bait, and you have one radar pointing back at you. And there's stuff you can add to your bait with metal shavings in it, but you can't beat a piece of metal that's really tiny, and it's flat, and it's metal. So sequin works really good, and all kinds of, the sky's the limit, and I'm sure you're going to think of stuff. But I always pitch past the fish, up or downwind. If you're approaching fish upwind, the nice thing is you can spot lock, and it's not going to lunge at the fish, and the turbulence blows back. So a lot in tournaments, we're pitching upwind. And I'd like to say, sometimes in a tournament, my partner and I will be up in front of the boat. And it all started, I got to give credit where credit's due, back with in forward viewing when Tom Wynn was winning all the tournaments. He showed up with a bass boat. Everybody seen him up in the bass boat, and he was winning all the tournaments up front. So he started a trend. It only makes sense. He was just ahead of the curve. So we're up in the front. But now I've got a Mega Live in the back and the front, so you could space it out, so you don't have to be crowding on each other. And if you're fishing for fun, you don't need to crowd each other. Have one in the front and back. They're actually quite affordable, and they got rebates. So look it up. swim it up to the fish and pause for a second. If they don't bite, pull it past them and jig it, and then pause and let the leech sink and then hop it up again. So what's happening, if you give it slack, it sinks down, then you hop it up again and hop it up, and you don't have to move it. Sometimes I like it when the sinker snags just a little bit, because then you can just lower the rod tip and pop it up, and you're jigging it in their face. And it's always right in front of their face, so it irritates them, the fish bite. And in my line of business, it's all about getting people their fish. And I do have people that catch and release and enjoy catching fish, but they are less than 5% of my clients. They want a meal of northern Minnesota walleyes. And so I got to walk the dock at the end of the day. So this is a better mousetrap, and that's why I do it. So I will pitch just ahead and down. So if I put my Mega Live down, it's like a tomahawk. It's a half circle like an axe, and you can see stuff. So I'll pitch it just a little ways. If I'm fishing in deep water, you're fishing closer. You don't have to launch it, way out there. And there's a lot of times that we're actually using it in down imaging mode to see the fish when you're fishing in 25 to 45 feet of water. It just makes sense. And you don't want your beam to disperse and get light, but so down works. And then getting into forward viewing, it's an odd shape. In geometry, I would have failed this part, but you can see the shapes of it. You get some coverage to the back. So really, when you're pitching, make sure you know distances. You might think you do, but then you cast. And I always have people, I'll say cast 30 feet, and they cast 60. And so it's a long time before their bait gets up there to the fish, and they swim. They don't stop. There's a lot of fish lately on the lakes I'm fishing, leech, Winnie, Cass, Bemidji, that are swimming really fast. So you have to get there quick. And on those days, I'll put on heavier sinkers. I'll go from a 3/16 to a quarter to a 3/8. So this is old Mega Live imaging, but I had it here when I was putting together after a guide trip. So I probably had toothpicks under my eyes, but you can see and you can measure the distance and throw at them. And to me, this is a weapon here, and I love it. And so using your stuff is very important. So now let's get back to the traditional drop shot. It's a hook that's Palomar knotted on your hook. The line's on the hook by a Palomar knot, but then you take one loop of line and go back through the hook down to the sinker, and that keeps it on straight. And this has been good for years, and traditional in bass fishing with a, using a wacky worm or a jig worm or even a fluke nose hooked and holding it in front of the fish. And this works for walleyes, but walleyes tend to run up to it. And when they come up to it, I've watched them in chin clear water where you can see 25 feet of water, but I'll be in 14 feet of water and you'll see the fish come up to it and then shake and spin in a circle and leave. Come up to it, grab it, hurry up and rip the leech off and take off before you can set the hook. And so seeing this and trying to make a better way, you get the wheels turning. And so I adjusted it, and you'll see here coming up. And that one works really good. I've tried like the G Finesse drop shots are nice because you could have them on your rod like this, and the tag line with the sinker you add later. So just easy for storage. You take your line and sinker off and wrap it on something or just make it as you go, and it just goes in that seam. So plastics or bait, just really good instant drop shot. It's really nice, and just add it on there. Very handy when I'm in a hurry guiding. And this one's great. That's the one I had with the plastic. You can put a half a crawler on there, and that hook gets way back there. I mean, it's all about hooking the fish where they're not going to get off. And this is a good one. Minnows, you can double hook a shiner. So if you've ever been by my boat and wonder how I'm getting fish to bite where no one else is getting the bite, you're seeing it right here. I'm double hooking shiners on this stuff, pitching it in when the walleyes are 3 feet off the bottom and jigging it until they hit it and they start running to the side. We set the hook and then you see me casting again after I land the fish. Well, it's this, and it's simple. It's been a really good weapon in minnow times, crawler times, plastics, and so look for that one. That's a swivel shot worm hook, and that's good on all different types of St. Croix rods, from your Avids to your Legend Elites to your Legend X, whatever you like to use it. And drop shots are more interactive. What I found when I'm fishing with a drop shot, if you throw a bobber, it's great. And you see a lot of tournaments, everybody's throwing bobbers, and they pull the bobber up to the fish, and the bait drops in front of the fish. And sometimes they can see the fish come up. They don't even look at their bobber. They're looking in their screen when they set the hook. They feel it. But if the wind starts blowing and the fish are moving around, you get one shot. Drop shots are fast. You can pitch it in there, and you can jig it up to them, and then you can jig it. The other day, 4 days ago, I had a client that was jigging it really hard, and I was telling someone, don't jig so hard, but then the client that was jigging hard was hammering them. He was jigging it like a jigging a minnow, and he was just hammering the walleyes one after another with leeches on the drop shot. So they're more interactive. Treat it like a jigging technique. If you give a drop shot and have a bunch of boats and a bunch of anglers, one person out of that whole group is going to hammer the fish all the time because of their cadence. And there's a jigging cadence to drop shotting, just like there's jigging. So keep that in mind when you're doing it. And you might come up with something, and I might want to know what it is sometime because it's always changing and it's really cool, but it's way faster. And if you want to get in, fish move fast, go heavier weight and throw it over there quick. You got to get down there because they're swimming by. And when it drops in, you don't want to drop it right on their head. It's not about throwing it it's not a game of cornhole. You're trying to throw it near them and then bring it to them. So be fast and heavy up if you have to. And there's a lot of adaptations, but here's mine. I take a short finger of line, and then I add decorations. I have beads. I have pill floats. I have multiple beads. I'll have little tiny bow ties. I'll have all kinds of things. And there's one tied right there. But that little finger line, when the fish come up, they can grab it and get away from the line that fish don't know it's line. They're just instinctive. Their reaction is to get away from danger, but grab that morsel of food. So they grab this. When they turn to go sideways, you hook them every time, and it gets down farther. Matter of fact, if you hook them too much, tie it shorter. If it's ending up in their gills or back in their throat. But I've never met an eater walleye that tasted bad because I hooked them in the throat. That's what ice is for. So finger line allows you so many things. Changing color hooks, and I like sometimes on trips I'll do the Vikings versus the Packers, and it gets heated. You put the color, you'll put purple and white or green and chartreuse and see who wins. And it's crazy from spot to spot, lake to lake. One color's better than another. And so I had really good luck mixing the two, even pink and purple, different colored hooks. Such a simple thing, but you'll have one hook and one bead color or three beads that'll all produce all of them, and throwing it in there. And you would think it would tangle because you got a finger of line. And I've got people launching these things from the boat. And all we ever do is we'll lose a leech because they whip it. And I'll talk about all the way to the spot how not to cast, and then they do it right away. But the women never forget because they get good memories, and they catch them right away. But you just gently toss it in, and you'd be surprised with the wind how far you can cast. And we, in the past, used to throw these. And when I first came up with the drop shot adaptation, the stealth rig, as it's been dubbed, and we always called it the stealth rig because we didn't want to tell anybody. And we used it in tournaments and stuff, and for many years. But now I'm saying it because it's starting to catch on, and tournaments have been won on the old style drop shots. So the stealth rig is good because it allows more line to the fish. Don't overweight it with too many decorations. but the sky's the limit, and you're going to come up with stuff maybe I haven't come up with. So definitely try it. It's better for hookups. And then I'm going to show you how to tie my stealth rig. But here's kind of a box. This gives you an idea what I start with. I have all these different colors, and I don't have every color. I mean, I could have 3 times this. I got to get stuff. There's times when during mayfly hatches, I'll use peach with a blue bead or peach with a pink bead, and then sometimes just pink or black or pink on a red hook. I've done well with chartreuse green and black, which is a perch pattern, like the black stripe on a perch. So the sky's the limit, and it's up to you. And then your drop shot, I'm using a cylinder sinker, but you can use split shot too. So through the magic of technology and my art, I'm going to show you how to tie this. So you make a loop. It's just a simple loop. I call it the steering wheel. And then once you make it, you have a hand on each side. You wrap it 6 times, and then you pull the bottom through the top of the steering wheel. And then you could, if you have something to hook it on the table, little knob, or I just grab it with my teeth and slide it together. It's traditional knot that we used in perch fishing, ocean fishing. Then slide the loops together to make the loop, and moisten it. It'll make it easier. And you could pull, but it's always nice to have something to hook it on. Like in a boat, I'll hook it on some instrument in the boat, and then I'll slide the 2 together because we only have 2 hands. It's kind of complicated in that way, but it's easy once you have something to hook it on. And then here's the best tip, because if you try threading a bead or a hook on that loop, you're going to get crazy. It's really hard to do. If you pinch the loop, you can make it a little pointy, but it's tough. So I take a segment of line, and I put a bead on and a hook on that segment of line. I thread it through the top twice. Then I slide it and put it on. So it slides it on the loop. And it's a simple thing. Or you can get a threader. They have threaders for bobbers and all different things, a little wire threader. But if you ain't got that, just take a loop of line. And you could pre-prep these. Put a piece of tape so it can't slide back off. And you can slide on different beads and have them ready to go. And it makes life so much easier to do this segment of line slide on. So definitely keep that in mind. Here's different ways to do it. So you got river sinker on the left, upper left. But how did I make that sinker stay on there? I make a little loop. I spin it into a knot tighten, and then pull the loop through the sinker and then wrap. Simple. You could use it on river sinkers, cylinder sinkers. But now on the lower right-hand corner is another one that I'm going to do it a lot more. I like using a bullet sinker. They're more available than the cylinders and the other sinkers, and they're a little bit cheaper. But get a tungsten bullet sinker or regular, and then put a bead underneath it to make it adjustable. Because the cylinder sinker is adjustable, but it cinches in your line. But every time you cast wrong, it flies off your hook, off your line, and you lose it. So if you want a totally adjustable rig, you could use split shot, but a bullet sinker, a bead, and 1 or 2 bobber knots trimmed works fantastic. And they make a metal bobber knot that you bend so it crimps on there. That works too. But a simple slip bobber knot, if you're using up to a 1/4 ounce, works fantastic. And you could adjust it and just leave extra slack line as you're fishing. The slack line going across the bottom does not scare the fish. So if you wonder how does the hook and the bead stand there, I wrap the end of the loop around the hook 3 times. And it'll hold up to anything. We've got 40-inch pike. We've got 32-inch walleye doing this. So you're good. And if you're using, if you're on a lake that's really, really tough, you can try 7-pound test or 7 or 8. But for the most part, I use 10. It makes that finger stick out. You really want to give them the finger if you get a chance. So you want it to stick out, and then wrap it around. But I'll use 10-pound Sunline fluorocarbon leader material, or I'll use Sniper or Assassin. Assassin's nice because I can use up to a 15, 16-pound test, and then I could wrap it, and you could pull a tree up to your boat with it. I mean, this is strong stuff. Plus, it sticks out there. And if I'm gonna trim it and tie a snell on there, I'll trim the bottom. I'll cut the bottom of the loop and I'll snell it to the top. And this is why. If something happens, you're going to lose the bottom, you're just losing your sinker, and that's still attached to your top. So always, if you're going to trim it and snell, cut the bottom of the loop, and then you got more line to work with. Works really great. So, and then attach it. I forgot to mention the last one. You attach it to your braid with a back-to-back uni. So your braid, your line, and then uni slide. So I use braid all the time, and I got the 20 feet of line, and then all that stuff casts so good, and you can just jig it through. So 3 to 4 feet to the braid, and you got plenty of time. But you could even put more. If you're going to be doing this a lot, prepare to have pike bite you off. I've had pike not just bite the hook off. I've had pike bite the knot that you tied it with. It looks like a bug or something. Not big pike, little 21-incher, but they take the whole works. Or they never take your sinker, but they'll bite the knots. And so be prepared and give yourself extra slack. So you can see here I use split shots. About this time when I was sketching all this stuff, I was running out of steam. and so it's getting lighter. But anyway, I like split shot if I'm in a snaggy spot. Split shot you get by a bag. Clip on a couple split shot, throw it into the rock pile, like on Leech Lake when I'm fishing these rock humps. Everything gets snagged in there. I bring a bag of split shot, and I'm holding my minnow above there, or my leech, and jigging it back. Or even if you're slow drifting, you could use this. And if you get snagged, you just lose your split shot. Who cares? You know. So that's one of the reasons I do that. And split shot, it's just they make them big. You can get small split shot, you can get big split shot. Put 1, 2, 3 of them on there, and give yourself some slack. But even if you're in 5 feet of water, sometimes we're in 5 feet of water, I still use it because the cracks in the boulders trap everything. But I go above where I'd imagine the tallest boulder would be, and that's where I'd have my bait, and your split shot are down in there. And you can even use, they have rip cord, parachute cord with sinkers in it that they heat. Those are nice too, but I'd hate to snag it and lose it. So the sky's the limit on this, and it really, really, really works good. Here's kind of an option. You can use, I use butterfly blades if I'm going at a slow speed with some 15, 16 pound assassin, 2 beads to a hook, and I'm set. You can use multiple beads. Oh yeah, Gumdrop Floaters. See, you can do a lot of things. Now you throw this out there on that. Remember, on windy days, if you're casting upwind, if you're using leeches, they spin like a prop, and that's the only time you could ever tangle. And this is light too, so that'll spin. But for the most part, they work really nice. The only issue with a gumdrop floater is you catch giant perch while you're fishing for walleyes, which is a good issue to have. And I use pill floats. I use little tiny props. The sky's the limit. And then there's my sinker box. And as you can see, I'm almost out of 4th ouncers because we've had a little bit of wind, and it's just right. 3/8 works great if you're fishing off the edge of a hump. And I've even used up a lot of my bullet sinkers that are a little bit heavier. But it's good to have all kinds of sinkers, and I'm ready for anything. If the fish are biting in 100 feet of water, I'm ready. If they're biting in 5 feet of water, I'm ready. And you can't have too small of them. I use a lot of 3/16 on calm days. You don't need to throw a boat anchor at them. 3/16 is a great size. Quarters, 3/8. I'll use, when need be, I'll even go lighter. I got split shots for that. And here's kind of a hook. This is, I mean, I can't get all the colors there that I use. This is kind of my deadly 6 right here. If I'm on Leech Lake, I've had really good luck with the green. Red works everywhere. Purple, you get into Bemidji and Cass are kind of weird. That they just like that stuff. Put a chartreuse bead on purple, works good. Pink and white, pink and black, glow white, and add an orange bead. You've got something. Just by changing the bead or the hook, you've changed everything. The options are limitless, and you can get on and stop into the shop here at St. Croix and or stop in wherever you're at and load up on this stuff. It makes a big difference. And once you're on the lake, keep washing it. And when you do well, save or take a picture of that combination, because when I'm tying through, I always do that because I might do multiple combinations even when I'm on a trip. But I have lots of experimental lines. There's days I have 3 lines besides mine, so I'm always washing colors, and there's always trends. 3 is a trend. 1 or 2 bites, no big deal. But if someone's getting 3 fish, that's a trend. And then the spin bait hook from Gamakatsu, got little barbs. Put your crawler up there, half a crawler. And if you're using it on this drop shot, use a little bit heavier line, 15-pound test. Throw it out, let it sink, and then just slow roll. This thing's going behind it. And you can do this 10 feet off the bottom. You could drift with it. I'm using forward viewing when I'm drifting too, so you can see the fish come in and tag it. But along weed lines, you find a nice milfoil line or coontail or cabbage, throw this in there, and you'd be surprised. And I can imagine how well that would work on Lake Oahe. And here's one that on a stealth rig with a leech, 32-incher. And here I'm in 28 feet of water, and this thing's 10 feet off the bottom. And it does get difficult to cast, but it's fantastic. And these are ghosts that live in lakes that people have heard that exist there. They're always there. Go out and catch them with a stealth rig. And then, of course, we can't answer questions, but a couple things before I go. Remember one thing. Drop shots always work. And there's times that bobbers work a little better. I have to leave that because there's times that a fireball jig with a half a crawler or a leech or a red tail work a little better. Like a red tail's squirrely. On drop shots, they want to swim down. They mess up the whole presentation. So if it's a minnow bite, I do like using bobbers with red tails. But drop shots with a behaved minnow, smaller, work great. The rest on bobbers. And then I also pitch rigs. There's times to pitch and then slow pull back. But either way, let them have it for a split second and set the hook with your reel. When I'm doing drop shots and I got a fish, there's so many people that want to just slam that fish home with a hook set and try to pull a largemouth bass out of the weeds on a lake in Florida. You're not in Florida. You're fishing walleyes. Reel really fast so it makes a squeaky noise from the braid. And then when your rod bends over, sweep. So what you're doing is you're absorbing all the slack. You're pulling that hook to a place where it could hook, and then you're driving it home. If you just set the hook on, especially on eater fish, you pop their mouth open and it's gone. Sometimes I will adjust the bead a little bit away from the hook because the bead could pop the fish's mouth open. A lot of little details you'll see as you go, but definitely try Bros Stealth Rig, my stealth rig, on your hook, on your St. Croix rod. And we appreciate you listening. Thanks, good luck fishing, and be safe on the water.